Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. I trust you all had a good weekend. We've certainly been enduring quite a fluid political situation here, and I'll get to that in a moment. But let me start with this photograph I found, Thunder Clouds, Indian Ocean, from the ISS, October the 23rd, from PC 0101. And of course I was born on the Indian Ocean in Mombasa. In August 2013, I wrote a piece about why I felt that I said I had no doubt that the Indian Ocean is set to regain its glory days. And, I started by quoting Professor Felipe Fernandez Armesto, who explains that the precocity of the Indian Ocean as a zone of long-range navigation and cultural exchange is one of the glaring facts of history, made possible by the reversible escalator of the monsoon. And I said I've no doubt that the Indian Ocean is set to regain its glory days. China's dependence on imported crude oil is increasing, and the US's, interestingly, is decreasing. I'm also certain that the eastern seaboard of Africa, from Mozambique all the way to Somalia, is the last great energy prize in the 21st century. And then I was talking about how control of the Indian Ocean becomes kind of decisive. And with control, China can be shut down quite quickly. A sine qua non, I said, of President Obama's pivot to Asia is US-NATO power projection over the Indian Ocean. Macro thoughts, correlations matter. J.S. Blockland, and bullish about dollar-yen in part because I'm expecting US 10-year yields to continue to climb higher. Now, I got caught wrong-footed by this huge, enormous surge in the price of oil at the back end of last week. It's now testing the channel's roof. It was a very aggressive up move last week, and it's difficult to work out whether it's headed back to an area of 62.65 on Brent, which is around 660 right now. Tech is shaping the world. 6 out of the 10 richest billionaires in the world made their fortunes in the tech space. That's Holger. Jeff Bezos seizes the title of the world's richest person as Amazon is eating the whole retail world indeed. Nasdaq moonshot in one chart. Tech index hits fresh highs following blowout tech earnings. Holger again. It's quite a story this year. It's really been about the dominance of technology. Home thoughts, it's my wife's birthday today. I'm grateful to her for every moment that she has shared with me. I'd like to thank her, wish her a happy birthday. On Friday, we took a detour deep into Kenya's coffee country, and I'll post a photograph from one of the coffee cooperatives that we visited. It was a fascinating and insightful trip. We did it with Nestle. I've been reading many books, but one quite extraordinary one is George Adamson's Bwana Game. George traversed most parts of Kenya, and most of the time on foot, and his descriptions are really worth reading. George Alexander Graham Adamson was born on the 3rd of February 1906 in India. Educated at Dean Close School, Cheltenham, he moved to Kenya in 1925. After a series of jobs which included time as a gold prospector, goat trader, and professional safari hunter, he joined Kenya's game department in 1938 and was senior wildlife warden of the Northern Frontier District. 6 years later, he married Joy. It was in 1956 that he raised the lioness cub Elsa, whom he helped to release into the wild, and who became the subject of the 1966 feature film Born Free, based on the book written by Joy. On August 1989, George Adamson was murdered near his camp in Kora National Park by Somali bandits when he went to the rescue of his assistant, a young European tourist in the Kora National Park. He was 83 years old. He's buried in the Kora National Park near his brother Terence super cub in Nugi, a lion released in Kora after George's death. Put up a photograph of George, who was born in 1906 and died in 1989. Old Man Jagger from Juhwansi. His ancestors have been hunting and gathering in southern Africa for well over 150,000 years, something to consider. Word of the day, heliotrope, an organism that keeps its face turned sunwards. Old English sunfulgent, sun follower, used especially with plants. Irungu posted a view I wouldn't mind right now. I wouldn't mind it either. Nairobi CBD empty this morning. This is not today. As the disputed presidential election gets underway, here's the scene outside the IEBC Kenya's office. That photograph was taken by Mark Anderson. Still one of my favorite photographs taken by David Yarrow. It's this one, Tim strolling through a yellow fever forest in southern Kenya. Stay safe, mate. It's been awesome. And then I came across this from Britta Jasinski, elephant footstools and other wildlife contraband seized at airports and photographed by Britta Jasinski. It's so awful, isn't it? Political reflections, the leader of NASA, Raila Odinga, said the only dialogue we can have with Uhuru Kenyatta is on how the country goes to fresh elections in 90 days, he told SABC News. And I said that would just be unconscionable at this point in time. The Emir of Qatar says regime change is the blockade's goal in an interview with Charlie Rose on CBS's 60 Minutes. In June last year, I wrote a piece about rolling over Qatar. Take a look at it. Robert Mueller sends a message he's deadly serious. This is in New York on Friday night. CNN reported that a grand jury in Washington, D.C. has approved the first charges arising from the special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into possible collusion between Donald Trump's presidential campaign and the Russian government. Citing sources briefed on the matter, the network said that a judge had ordered the charges kept under seal, but at least one arrest could take place as early as Monday, apparently. Plausible as that theory sounds, it too is conjecture. What isn't speculation is the fact that 5 months into this investigation, Mueller has brought a first set of criminal charges. By the standards of recent special prosecutors, this is fast work, and it confirms Mueller's reputation as someone who doesn't like to dally. Now that he has started arresting people, there is no reason to suppose he will stop, and that is precisely the message he wants to send. Trump, in response, has launched a wide-ranging attack on Democrats the day before charges are expected in this Russian collusion investigation. And I take you back to December last year when I wrote that piece, We Have a Deviate Tomahawk. And I said then my starting point is the election of Donald Trump, because hindsight will surely show that Russia ran a seriously sophisticated program of interference, mostly digital. Don DeLillo is a prophetic 21st century writer, writes as follows in one of his short stories. The specialist is monitoring data on his mission console when a voice breaks in, a voice that carried with it a strange and unspecifiable poignancy. He checks in with his flight dynamics and conceptual paradigm officers at Colorado Command. We have a deviate tomahawk. We copy. There's a voice. We have gross oscillation here. There's some interference. I have gone redundant. but I'm not sure it's helping. We are clearing an out frame to locate the source. Thank you, Colorado. It is probably just selective noise. Your negative red on the step function quad was a voice, I told them. We have just received an affirm on selective noise. We will correct Tomahawk. In the meantime, advise you to stay redundant. The voice, in contrast to Colorado's metallic pidgin, is a melange of repartee, laughter and song with the quality of purest, sweetest sadness. Somehow we were picking up signals from radio programs of 40, 50, 60 years ago. I said, then hindsight will surely show that Russia ran a seriously sophisticated program of interference, mostly digital. And I said, you know, Putin's seriously 21st century, predominantly digital program of interference amplified the Trump candidacy. I said, the first thing is plausible deniability, and this is the challenge for Mueller. I said Trump was an ideal candidate for this kind of support. He's a linguistic warfare specialist. Look at the names he gave his opponents: Crooked Hillary, Lying Ted, Little Marco, Low Energy Jeb, were devastating and terminal. The first thing is plausible deniability. I said the second thing is non-linearity. You have to learn to navigate a linear system within the 21st century digital ecosystem in a non-linear way. And essentially that's why it's going to be so difficult for Mueller to connect the dots. I then said Putin has proven himself an information master, and his adversaries are his information victims. Wole Soyinka told David Pilley on burning his green card to have some redneck ride into power on the steed of racism was too much. How to Greet a Presidential Motorcade, US edition, photographed by B. Smielowski. No role for Assad in Syria's future, US's Tillerson. But Assad, of course, was the first leader to repel the regime changes in point of fact. How to Defeat a Dictator, Wait for Them to Screw Up, interesting article in Bloomberg View. Treisman notes that in 85% of the episodes he studied, democratization was preceded by mass unrest. Sooner or later, people tend to get tired of regimes in which they have little say. Then it only takes a misstep from the one person at the center of such a regime. Dictators often overestimate the external danger to their power, the plots of foreign or exiled enemies. In the final analysis, they are the biggest threats to themselves. Wrote something about this populist world on the 2nd of October. Do take a look. US 10-year yield remains above 2.4%. This is key to the future progress of the dollar, about which I'm constructive. Let's move on to the currency markets. Euro dollar 116.10. Dollar index 94.77. Japanese yen last trading 113.66. Swiss franc 0.9974. The pound 131.36. The Australian dollar 0.7670. India rupee 64.895. South Korean won 11.2408. Brazilian real 323.66. Egyptian pound 17.6435, and the rand, which had a blowout last week, last trading 14.1044. Dollar index, this is a 1-year chart. My target is now 95.50, and my stop is at 93.50. Euro seen here compared with the net long position, which is very elevated, and my target here is 114.50, notwithstanding whatever happens in Catalonia. Commodity markets, big debate if gold is heading lower into the 1240 range or gold is about to break out now. This is a descending triangle, breaks down 64% of the time, says Nassar Investing. WTI crude oil above $54, very powerful up move last week, caught me off guard. Let's see if we see some follow through this week. Last year's big bond winners aren't looking so fantastic now. That's because last year's best emerging market dollar bond bets are posting the starkest reversals. Venezuela, Ecuador and Gabon, which led the pack in 2016, had some of the worst changes according to data compiled by Bloomberg. Take a look at the chart. The business of fear in boomtown Mogadishu is an interesting article in Der Spiegel. The first courses has just been served when the war came to the country club in Mogadishu. 50 guests, including business people and government officials, were sitting at long tables laden with bowls of camel stew, goat meat, lobster and swordfish. When a van filled with explosives detonated in front of the gate, the resulting explosion demolished part of the protective wall, blew the second floor right off the villa and destroyed the building's entire front. Warlords and dubious businessmen are in power here. In addition to Al-Shabaab, the Al-Qaeda allies are responsible for the deaths of 4,200 people in the past year alone. The recent attack in mid-October, in which over 300 people died, has also been attributed to the terror group. And yet Mogadishu is booming. The city is a metropolis of fear. Its business model is chaos. Saying according to studies, Somalia might sit on top of enormous oil reserves and the Turks could be looking to make money off them. The Turks, says Mana Mualim, are taking over the country. Mozambique's president dismissed the head of intelligence and his army chief. He's taking more control. Very interesting article in IRIN about pastoralism and its future. The defining characteristic of pastoralism is known as strategic mobility. It's strategic because whilst appearing aimless or haphazard to the untrained eye, its motive is to enhance production and herd size by ensuring livestock consumes the most nutritional grass available. It is known as transhumance, whereas nomadism describes journeys that vary according to the location of the best resources. Put in economic terms, pastoralism is a complex exercise in the perpetual analysis. Sorry, a little bit of a gap here. Where was I? Estimates of the total number of people living a pastoral livelihood vary wildly. A 2006 study published by the Food and Agriculture Organization put the number at 120 million, which includes some people who also grow crops known as agro-pastoralists. Of these, 50 million are in Sub-Saharan Africa, 31 million in the Middle East and North Africa, 25 million in Central Asia, 10 million in South Asia, and 5 million in South and Central America. Not long after the FAO published the study, the International Fund for Agricultural Development said there were 200 million pastoralists in the world. A 2007 estimate put the number of animals raised in pastoral production system in Kenya alone at 14.1 million, with a value of $860 million. Extraordinary article in the Sunday Times, South African Sunday Times. He's a gangster like us. New book reveals Zuma's darkest secret. Exclusive extract from Jack Paul's The President's Keepers, which delves into a world of lethal criminals, the men who keep this toxic president in power. My sources tell me that by May 2015, Zuma had still not submitted his returns. They also gave a fascinating account of an incident in early 2011, when a donation from Nkandla arrived on a private jet at King Shaka International Airport outside Durban. When customs investigated the cargo, they found, among other things, medical equipment on board. The shipment originated in Russia, and the sender was a name by the name of Vladimir Stratskovsky. An internet search revealed that Stratskovsky, a former KGB agent, joined the ranks of post-communist Russia's oligarchs and became one of the biggest businessmen in that country. He is the former CEO of Norilsk Nickel, the world's largest nickel and palladium producer, Strykowski received a 1.4 billion payout in 2012 to step down from Norilsk Nickel, and saying, but that's not the end of it, said my source. The medical equipment wasn't all that SARS detained on that day at the airport. What else? There was a lot of cash on that plane. A lot. Have a look at the front page that they put out yesterday. The presidency, of course, rejected these allegations. Zapiro, Borscht conspiracy by Zapiro, and then budget statement by Zapiro, which is extremely powerful. The Treasury said the deficit was likely to reach 4.3% of GDP in the 2017-2018 fiscal year. Forget the numbers. The gist of the budget is this. Technocrats painted a realistic and precarious state of public finances, but said they can't do anything. RMB Global Markets said in a note, forget the numbers, the gist of the budget is this. That's as I said. Rand traders brace for a rocky ride over the next 2 months. The South African Rand's price swings are set to increase over the next 2 months. Take a look at 2-month implied volatility, surge to the highest in more than 11 months. South African all-share took the weak Rand as a plus and has rallied to an all-time high. It's up 15.91% this year. Take a look at this chart I came across from Tech Charts. Dollar Rand, I think we're going to target 14.40, and I know T Commodities looking for 15. Barrick has been hammered since that the announcement of the negotiations with President Magufuli were reported. Proportionate to population, we have a world record number of imbeciles, Wale Soyinka, on frustration with Nigeria. The Nigerian all shares up 35.68% year to date. The Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index is up 39.25% year to date. I like this photograph, fish feeding in the evening in the Maldives. President Kenyatta said largely 90% of the country is calm, is peaceful, is voting. My piece over the weekend was entitled Finding the Path Back to Political Equilibrium. President Kenyatta has won more than 97% of votes counted so far, according to the media. Turnout has been estimated to be around between 35 to 40%. Deputy President William Ruto sought to wield the political guillotine and tweeted, evidently, it doesn't matter how powerful, popular one or their party imagines to be, the repeat elections confirm that people are supreme. I, for one, believe that the President won the first iteration of the election and that the Supreme Court, while striking a deep blow for transparency and constitutionality, failed entirely to weigh the consequences of their decision and to provide a roadmap. However, what is clear is that we have now been overtaken by events and that the current political situation is best described as one of disequilibrium. Finding the path back to political equilibrium, a state in which opposing forces or influences are balanced, the maintenance of social equilibrium, synonyms, balance, symmetry, equipoise, parity, equality, stability, the equilibrium of the economy, antonyms are imbalance, I stumbled over a rock and recovered my equilibrium, is now the central question and in fact a sine qua non for the economy, which has slowed dramatically and where we need to absolutely avoid cliff edge effects. CAPSA said that the 4-month electioneering period had cost the country $7 billion in losses. Investors at the NSC have lost $2.27 billion over the past 4 weeks. We are growing at the slowest pace in 6 years. Anecdotal evidence is speaking to an average 25 to 30% haircut on year turnover across Kenya Inc. Economic indicators are blinking amber. I came across this comment from Eric Chitai, a security guard in Kisumu, in a magnific Reuters report. People from this region are feeling isolated from the rest of the country. We are feeling disconnected. In his marvelous book, The Tipping Point, Malcolm Gladwell talks about 3 different archetypes of people: mavens, connectors, and salespeople. The connectors, according to Malcolm Gladwell, make change happen through people. They galvanize people, they're natural hubs, they're just the way they're orientated toward the world. President Kenyatta is a mercurial and popular politician. I recall a quote from someone speaking about President Clinton, who described meeting him thus: President Clinton locked onto you and made you feel like you were the only person in the room. President Kenyatta has a similar political style and charisma. He will be the president of Kenya, a nation of more than 40 million citizens. The political reality, and in fact his legacy, is now going to be calibrated on how he reconnects people like Eric Chitai. Everyone is a shareholder in this Kenya Inc. enterprise, or as Marshall McLuhan once said, there are no passengers on spaceship Earth, read Kenya, we are all crew. This, in my view, is a political imperative, the reconnection of 40 million Kenyans to spaceship Kenya, without which we're going to continue sputtering. Raila Odinga called for calm in Kawangware, which was hit by deadly violence over the weekend. The Economist is calling our fresh election preposterously flawed. When Mr. Odinga withdrew, it seemed like a last roll of the dice. Although the IEBC made plenty of errors in the tallying and transmission of votes, there is little proof that the election in August was rigged, as Mr. Odinga claims. Short of the cash needed to continue campaigning, Mr. Odinga's boycott seems to have been a desperate attempt to avoid an election he would probably have lost anyway, which is what I was saying before. People don't care who wins, Winamo said in an interview at the Gatina Pentecostal Assemblies of God Church in Kawangware. All they want is a united Kenya. Most of the people are suffering. They are skipping meals. There is a lot of poverty and sickness, he said. The turmoil has weighed on investors, with the NSC dropping 5.5% since the election outcome was declared void on September the 1st. Government's bonds, 2024 maturity, climbed 30 basis points to 6.32%. As Hervé pointed out to me, the precursor of the NASA coalition's national resistance movement is, of course, President Museveni. The opposition, of course, blocked elections in a number of key constituencies. Government's revenue has fallen short by 51 billion shillings. That's a big hit in the first 3 months of the current financial year. This is what I was talking about, linking Amber. Kenya is the great hope for investors in Africa as a non-commodity producing country, which has the potential to industrialize ahead of its peers, with money going into the railways, roads and ports, and Daniel Salter, head of equity strategy at Renaissance Capital. It is a country that investors want to like, but what they don't like is the current uncertainty. Coca-Cola is to invest up to $90 million in Kenya to broaden its product range. That's good news. KCB Group has secured a $100 million loan from the AFDB for onward lending to small and medium-sized enterprises. KCB is up 47.82% on a total return basis this year. Kenya shilling at 103.80. Nairobi all share up 19.9% year to date. I expect it to trend higher. I like this. Wake-up calls for an early morning game drive may not be very pleasant, but such views make them all the more worthwhile. Serena Sweetwaters. NSE 20 is up 14.5% year to date. And let me leave you with this: a fisherman and his dam from Kesh and Pamba. Once again, thank you kindly for stopping by.